ataupun untuk menghadapi cabaran-cabaran akibat pandemik, mungkin akibat salah satunya ialah COVID-19 ini, maka mereka they decide to take their own life. And so it is quite beneficial and important for us to be able to look into ourselves so that then we are able to have that level of resilience ataupun di dalam bahasa Malaysia kekentalan dalaman diri. Kerana apabila kita, when we are able to overcome, when we are able to address the challenges that we have and face in our life, then we are able to either bounce back or we are able to face the challenges that we have in our life in a more effective way. And therefore, perkara pertama, the first thing that I would like to share with you today is a metaphor called the Sailboat Metaphor. That's the first thing that I would like to share with you today, the Sailboat Metaphor. And then I would also like to be able to share with you, once we understand what the Sailboat Metaphor is, we will then look at the different types of stress. And also, after we have understood what stress is, then we will look at ways that we are able to manage the psychological challenges that we have in our life more appropriately. So there is a kesinambungan, there is a continuation, there is a flow to what I hope tonight's webinar will be, and hopefully all of you will be able to understand better in terms of the presentation that I will be doing tonight. So as I mentioned before, the first aim and the first in terms of concept in a way that I would like to share with you is the sailboat metaphor. So I am going to now share a tab about this particular concept. Okay, Bisyri, boleh saya confirm yang Bisyri boleh nampak slide? Boleh nampak Okay. Dia bergerak tak?
Yes, bergerak.
Bergerak Alright. Thank you, Bisyri. So, the first thing that we'll be looking at tonight is a concept that I hope you will find interesting as much as I did when I actually learned about this metaphor, the sailboat metaphor. So, what is the sailboat metaphor? The sailboat metaphor compares the human functioning and our overall well-being with a captain who has a sailboat and the journey that the sailboat undertook. So this metaphor aims to help the individual realize that he or she is the captain of his or her own ship, and as such, he or she can take effective action. I hope it will be okay if I generalize, if I say he, but I am trying to ensure that it actually doesn't matter the gender, doesn't matter the races, but for the purpose of making it a little bit more smooth, I will use the term as he to identify the captain. I hope that will be okay. So as I mentioned before, this particular sailboat metaphor aims to help the individual realize that he is the captain of his own ship, and as such, he can take effective action. Because this realization will allow the individual to align his behavior with his own personal values and take responsibility for his own behavior and thus the reality. So there are three key components to this sailboat metaphor. The first one is the sailboat itself. The second component is the captain, which is signified by the cap of the captain. And the third key component is the lighthouse, or in BM, rumah api. So the first two is quite important for us to know. The third one, which is the lighthouse, I will touch on it a little bit briefly, but still it is quite important for us to know this particular component of the sailboat metaphor. And hopefully, once we understand this particular metaphor and look at its relationship with our overall well-being and our functioning as a person, then it will actually help us to develop a balanced and complete perspective of ourselves, which is a perspective that considers the many factors, positive and negative, controllable and uncontrollable, that will determine daily behavior and our experiences. So the keyword that I hope you are able to see is autonomy, which means our ability to make our own decisions. So autonomy will emerge through becoming aware of our own personal strengths as well as weaknesses, of factors that can and cannot be controlled, and of positive and negative social forces. The other one is about authenticity as well as resilience. Like I shared before, in terms of being able to have an increased levels of resilience, kekentalan dalaman diri, when we are able to face the challenges that we will have in our life, as we know that there are a lot of things that happen in our life that are uncontrollable, and therefore sometimes, maybe a lot of times, these uncontrollable things will actually have an impact on our emotional well-being. And therefore, if we are able to look at these challenges and also hopefully to be able to overcome these challenges, it will then help us to increase our levels of resilience. Bisri, boleh saya confirm slide bergerak tak?
Dah, saya dah the next page already.
Awesome. Thank you, Bisyri. Just wanted to check. Okay, so the first key component of this sailboat metaphor is the sailboat. And there are 8 elements of the sailboat. Maybe it will help if we can try to imagine. Let's use our creativity of our mind to imagine a sailboat. And there are 8 elements of the sailboat, which we'll look in detail in a short time. The first element of the sailboat is the water. So I hope you are able to see on our 6 o'clock, the water sign is blackened, yeah? And so this is the first element of the sailboat, which is the water. So if we imagine the water is quite wide, it's very vast. We assume that the end of the ocean that we look is actually the end, but as we know, the earth is round sphere. So when we reach to that end, there is actually another part that will actually look, because the ocean is very, very big. It's vast. It's very wide. And therefore, if we are able to relate in terms of the sailboat for the element of water, the water can be compared to what we could call the playground of life. Just like the water encompasses the space in which the boat is held afloat and moves, it represents the direct environment in which we live and with which we interact. This environment is divided into many different domains, including our job, relationship with husband or wife, relationships with our friends, our financial situation, and so on. So the list goes on and on and on, just like the ocean. So this is our direct physical reality, which is the ocean. The second key element of the sailboat, if we can imagine, this is a compass. So kalau ada di kalangan kita yang pernah jadi pengakap ke mungkin Persatuan Pandu Puteri ke, all those organizations yang mungkin memerlukan pergi ke hutan-hutan, the jungle, to be able to have that life survival sort of test. Compass is something that is quite important for us to have at the time. The same goes to the sailboat. A compass is an instrument that we use for navigation and orientation that shows direction relative to the environment. So it provides feedback on the current direction in which we are heading. So when we want to relate back to our functioning and well-being, experiences like feelings, emotions, bodily sensations, and intuition serve as a tool for navigating and orienting. Both positive and negative experiences, they are signals that provide feedback as we navigate our life's journey. Thus, it is very important and they serve as a valuable guide. For this reason, it is very, very important to us to pay attention to all these signals that we receive and allow them to be present. Positive experiences, I think this is quite easy for us to imagine. Joy, relaxation, and energy signal personal well being and inform us that we are on the right track. These experiences can serve as a direct reinforcer and over time will build long lasting resources, which we'll look at element number 5, sales ataupun dalam BM, layar. At the same time, negative experiences such as fear and pain, guilt, sad, they inform us that attention is required. So rather than suppressing these negative experiences, which sometimes we tend to do that, allowing them to be present without acting upon them can reveal valuable information that may assist us on our journey. Fear, for instance, ketakutan, it may signal that we are approaching the edge of our comfort zone. Since we are uncertain about the other side of the ocean, of what it will look like, naturally we will experience fear. Fear may indicate that we have a chance to broaden our horizons and expand our comfort zone. Possibly, we may also realize that the thing that is causing us to fear is important to us. Because after all, why would we experience fear if we did not care about it? And it will give us insight into a personal value, which we will look at the third element, which is the steering wheel. So it is also important for us to note that the emotional experience itself, it is never a problem. The experience that we have in terms of our emotions, it is never a problem. In terms of this particular sailboat metaphor, the compass is not the problem. It simply provides information and feedback. That is the true purpose of the compass, providing information and feedback. The problem arises when a person uses his compass in an ineffective way. For example, many individuals they attempt to control or avoid the negative experiences that their compass indicates, but they will then realize such avoidance behaviors can actually lead to an increase in negative experiences. So if we want to look these emotions a little bit further, the count will vary depending on which expert you ask. But for this particular purpose, let's say there are 7 basic emotions. We have joy, anger, sadness, fear, surprise, content, and disgust. As we have already heard, all these emotions are still with us because they have helped us survive through millions of years of evolution. And yet, 5 of them, anger, sadness, fear, content, and disgust, are clearly on the not so comfortable end of the spectrum. Surprise can go either way lah. But so, what does it mean though? That most of our emotions reflect the dark side of human experience. If so many of our emotions are troubling and yet helpful enough to make the cut of natural selection, doesn't that mean that even the dark and difficult feelings have a purpose? Is that why we shouldn't try to avoid them but rather accept them as a useful, though sometimes uncomfortable part of our lives? I think maybe most of us might answer yes, because if all these emotions survive through hundreds and millions of years of evolution and they survive through the natural selection, it would be sensible for us to actually accept these uncomfortable feelings and look at them as a source of data, as a useful source of information that will actually help us to be able to go through in our daily life. So that is the second element of this sailboat metaphor. The third element of the sailboat consists of the steering wheel. If we can imagine, the steering wheel actually will determine where the boat will go. So if we want to relate to our human functioning or well-being, the steering wheel represents our values. They are the answer to the question that we always ask, what do we find important in our life? When we live according to our true values, there is an accompanying sense of fulfilling our deepest purpose in life. This is what values are. They provide the direction and meaning that we need to lead fulfilling and rewarding lives. Values, they are best compared to directions rather than destinations, like the steering wheel that will determine a certain direction, whereas goals or destinations, which is the last element of this metaphor, can be achieved. Values cannot be achieved. For example, the value of being creative, it can never be completely fulfilled. Even if a person creates a painting, which is a goal, it would be silly to say, now that I have created this paint, now that I have created this painting, I've accomplished creativity. Now I'll proceed to the next thing. Because we know being creative can be applicable in a lot of things, not just in painting. Therefore, values are best formulated as verbs, as something that is never fully achieved. A value might be being creative or contributing to others' well-being. Other words that maybe we usually hear that our values might include honesty, sincerity, humility, spirituality, curiosity, kindness, forgiveness, gratitude, perseverance, hope, etc. A lot of these words, they are values. But it is actually important for us to know that this is something ongoing. This is something that we always strive to do for the rest of our life. So when we talk about values, they are consist of adaptive and maladaptive. In other words, they are good and not so good. Adaptive values, they contribute to our well-being, while maladaptive values reduce our well-being. When individuals, they have lost connection with their adaptive values, it is often because one or more of the elements of the boat receive a disproportionate level of attention. For example, an individual who experiences fear, which we know is one of the emotions, which is the compass, he may spend a lot of time trying to control and reduce the fear. He is constantly monitoring and trying to control his inner experiences. In other words, undue attention is focused on the compass, and safety and control become the main direction of his sailboat. But sailing in this direction will actually cause the fear to increase. The values of safety and control, therefore, will affect his well-being in a negative way. Another example is that maybe another individual may focus too much on the values of other people, which is represented in the other boats element, which we'll also look at later. This focus may be the result of a need for approval, a value that is currently guiding his behavior, but which does not contribute to his well-being in a positive way. I do though want to make a further note on this emotion of fear. It would be sensible for us to abandon the idea of being fearless. Instead, let's walk directly into our fears with our values as our guide towards what matter to us. In other words, courage, it is not the absence of fear. Courage, it is fear walking. That is what courage is. The next element of the sailboat, which when I actually share this with uh, my patients, they tend to chuckle because they know what this particular element represents. A leak in the boat represents a weakness. Thus, it reflects a personal characteristic that reduces the person's well-being. Weaknesses can be present at the physical level, cognitive level, and or behavioral level. At the physical level, the individual may experience pain, hunger, fatigue, or other body-related issues that reduce his well-being. At a cognitive level, the individual may, for instance, suffer from rumination. Rumination, in simpler words, is keep on thinking about the same thing over and over and over again. That's what rumination is. Or worry, self-blame, or unrealistic setting unrealistic standards. At a behavioral level, the individual may engage in behaviors that result in lower levels of well-being, such as aggression, pleasing others, acting impulsively, and procrastinating. Just like leaks are considered internal problems for a boat, weaknesses can be considered internal triggers or stressors. They come from our own personal goals, expectations, standards, perceptions, desires, and all those other things that we actually put in ourselves. In other words, they come from within and they are self-induced. In contrast, external stressors or external triggers, they are generated outside of the individual. In many cases, and as we know, they are uncontrollable circumstances. For example, just now Bisyri shared about the loss of my late father, or maybe there might be some of us due to the pandemic has lost his or her employment. So in the sailboat metaphor, these external stressors or triggers are represented by weather or events. We will look at in the element number 6. So a weakness focus centers solely on the leak. Although the leak is not the only defining characteristic of the boat, because we know the boat has sails, the boat has steering wheel, the boat has compass, the boat has other boats, the boat has all those other elements. We focus our attention only on this specific aspect of the boat. The idea behind the weakness focus is clear and well-meaning. That is, they believe by fixing the weakness, they aim to increase their well-being. Or maybe for the purpose of the sailboat, by fixing the leak, they expect the boat to be able to sail again. That is true. It is true because if we do not fix the leak, then the boat will sink and the individual will not be able to sail anywhere. However, aiming to increase well-being by only focusing on repairing the leak of the boat is unlikely to result in success or reaching a destination or a goal, because this ignores the fact that the absence of problems or our illnesses maybe, they do not automatically imply well-being. And when we talk about the sailboat itself, even if we will be able to repair our leak, we still may not be able to get to the destination because we rely on the sails, for example, to generate the momentum to make sure that it catches the wind for the boat to move. So in summary, in terms of my explanation for this particular point, although it is important to address weaknesses to prevent our boat from sinking, we also must actually hoist the sails or adjust, in other words, the sails to catch a favorable wind, which is the opportunity, and then be able to move forward with our sailboat. So we already talked about sails, which is the fifth element of this particular metaphor. Sails, they represent our strengths. Personal strengths, they can be factors that will facilitate our goal achievement, and will actually help to increase our personal well-being. These factors are positive traits that are reflected in our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. So our strengths, they can include perhaps ways of thinking, ways of feeling, and maybe ways of behaving that are authentic and energizing to ourselves. Because if we use the strengths, it will actually enable optimal functioning, development, and performance of our life. So when I said just now, ways of thinking, maybe or maybe ways of behaving, maybe it will be about how the person has an effective coping styles, like optimism or acceptance, but also activities that maybe provide energy and enthusiasm, maybe writing or painting. And for this particular sailboat metaphor, strengths are represented by the sails of the boat. Without the sails of the boat would float aimlessly in the water, not going anywhere. Just like strengths allow us to flourish in our life, the sails allow the boat to move in favorable directions. The sails of the boat, like I said just now, generate momentum, helping the captain to create a journey that is worth traveling. A person who uses his strengths will feel energized and engaged, like a boat that is sailing at full speed with the wind at its sails. The sixth element of this sailboat, we have briefly touched upon this, is the weather. Life events, like I mentioned just now, are external things that happen to us. Real life examples, like I mentioned just now, the loss of a loved one. At the moment, there's no traffic, but when usually the lockdown's not around, we might get stuck in traffic or maybe falling in love, etc. A lot of things that are outside of our control. Although we often have limited control over these events, the way we deal with them can have a serious effect on our well-being. In this sailboat metaphor, life events can be compared to the weather. Sometimes the situations that allow us to use our strengths optimally. At other times, the wind and the rain can make it difficult to keep traveling in our preferred direction. And that is why these life events, although we have limited control, how we deal with them will have a very powerful impact on our well-being. The seventh element of this sailboat metaphor is the other boats. The other boats in the sea represent the people that surround us. These boats can be compared to our social network. Our boats can influence us in many ways, both positively and negatively. For example, when we decide to turn the steering wheel and take a different course, we may experience support from peers who motivate us to pursue our new direction. At the same time, there will be others who may disapprove of the new direction and provoke feelings of self doubt and fear within us, which comes back to the compass. So, in that second case, in the latter case, it is important to stay true to our values and to our direction rather than letting others determine the course of our boat. Our social network may also offer support in difficult times. For example, in times of stormy weather, other boats can help us stay on our course and remind us of what is truly important in our journey, which is our core values, our steering wheel. And the last element of this sailboat metaphor is the destination. Just like a boat can sail to certain destinations, people can steer to reach their goals. While a value reflects the general direction of the boat, a goal represents a specific and concrete destination of the boat. Goal setting and achievement, they are important processes that can help to concretize the values. Goals can help translate values. Just now, I used value of creativity into practice. Moreover, achieving personally meaningful goals can help build our self-confidence and our self-efficacy. A quick word about goals. Mungkin we might heard about short-term and long-term goals, but maybe this is a new information that you might want to know. There are actually different types of goals. We have, just now I mentioned about short-term goals and long-term goals. Those are what we call proximity goals. Proximity refers to the nearness of goals in time. While some goals can be accomplished within a relatively short period amount of time, others require long-term investment and commitment. That is the first type of goal. The second type of goal we call action orientation goals, which consists of approach goals versus avoidance goals. Action orientation goals mean while some goals trigger action to move towards them, if we can imagine, this will be approach goals. Others will motivate action to move away from them, which will be avoidance goals. That is the second type of goals. The third type of the goals is what we call purpose goals, which consists of performance goals versus learning goals. Not all goals have the same purpose. Goals can serve the purpose of developing or acquiring an attribute, such as a specific task, skill, or knowledge. Alternatively, goals can also serve the purpose of validating personal attributes, such as ability and seeking positive evaluations of those attributes from others. So these are the three main types of goals, and each type of these goals, they have their own goals. So I hope this has been an insight for all of you to understand about destinations, goals, because it is very, very important, albeit it is the last element of this sailboat. So that is the first key component of the sailboat metaphor. Now let's talk about the captain who actually drives the sailboat. Captain yang mengemudi kapal layar tersebut. So the 8 elements of the sailboat described earlier, they all represent the key aspects of human functioning. It is important to note that these key aspects will influence the well-being of ourselves, but they do not define us. The best way to define the individual in the sailboat metaphor is by comparing him or her to the captain of the boat. As the captain, the individual can turn the steering wheel in a certain direction. Rather than a leak in the boat, the individual is the captain. He or she can become aware of this leak and do something about it. In a similar vein, for example, the individual does not represent the destination he or she reaches, but the captain chooses to pursue these destinations in the first place. So how the captain relates to the 8 elements of the boat represents the relationship that the individual has with himself and others. Imagine a captain believing his boat is worth nothing because of a leak. No matter how beautiful past journeys have been and how powerful the sails of the boat are, the view of the captain regarding the leak heavily influences his relationship with his boat. Thus, he may consider it worthless. This example resembles the relationship that many people have with their personal weaknesses. Many people are afraid to fail or make mistakes, and when they do, they beat themselves up for their failings, rather than allowing themselves to be human and accepting themselves or making mistakes and failing. They show very little self-compassion. It is important to note that it is not the individual's weaknesses in the first place that affect their well-being, but the relationship with their weaknesses. Therefore, it is important for us to not only address the 8 different components of the sailboat, but to identify the captain's perspective as well. So there are 4 elements within the captain, and in the sailboat metaphor, the captain's relationship with each of the 8 sailboat elements are determined by attention, thoughts, motivation, and action. So let's look at the first one, which is represented by the eye. This is what we call attention. Attention can be compared to a telescope. A telescope is a powerful instrument through which we can select, bring into focus, and magnify the stimuli we experience in our world. Our experience are largely determined by the way in which we pay attention to ourselves and our surroundings. So attention is essentially the ability of the captain to concentrate on a particular element of the boat. There are 2 elements of attention that are important here. The first element is the amount of attention paid by the captain to a certain element. For example, how much attention is devoted to the destination? Is the captain constantly looking forward, perhaps paying too much attention to future destinations while forgetting to pay attention to the journey as well? How much attention does the captain pay to the direction of the boat? Is he checking sufficiently whether the boat is still on track? How much attention does the captain devote to the captains of the other boats during his journey? That is the first element of the attention. The second element is the consideration of the nature of attention given. For example, how does the captain of the boat direct attention to the different elements of his boat? Is the captain's attention rigid, judgmental, and scattered? Or is his attention open and non-judgmental, focused on singular element of the boat? So that is the second element of attention. The second element within the captain is the thought. This is also quite common that I have found when I am helping patients in my practice. The thoughts of the captain represent our processes. We call it cognitive processes that accompany interactions with different parts of the boat. For example, thoughts may include expectancies regarding the ability of the captain to cover the leak of the boat, thinking patterns that are present when using the sails of the boat, or beliefs about how to use the feedback from the compass of his sailboat. Although thoughts may to some degree reflect reality, they can also be distorted, and although never tested, they strongly determine the behavior and actions of the captain. It is important then to note that not the thought itself is problematic, but the fact that the captain perceives certain thoughts to be true, often without being aware of their direct effect on well-being. So, for this particular element within the captain, I hope you will understand that it's not the thought itself that is problematic, but the fact that sometimes we perceive certain thoughts to be true, often without being aware of its impact on our well-being. So that is the second element within the captain. The third element is the motivation. It is also a big thing when we talk about the element of ourself, motivation. The motivation of the captain represents the motivational orientation underlying the different elements of the boat. Why are the chosen destinations of the boat important to the captain, for example? Why are the leaks of the boat still not covered? How does the captain benefit from using the sails of his boat? So, examining the motivational orientation of the captain regarding his sailboat will provide insight into the boat's past, current, and future journey. And the last element within the captain is the action. The actions of the captain represent the direct way in which the captain interacts with the different element of the boat. For example, how does the captain deal with leaks on the boat? Is the captain able to cover the leak? Is the captain able to turn the steering wheel? Is the captain able to hoist the sails and sail in a valuable direction? When fostering our ability to make our own decision, which is our autonomy, it is which we know is one of the most important outcomes of our well-being. The individual or we can be viewed as embodying the role of a captain. We are in charge of our boat and our journey, rather than living in a mindless, passive state where we are strongly influenced by forces outside ourselves. We are holding the steering wheel firmly, looking ahead and planning carefully for a journey that we believe is worth taking. That is what essentially autonomy is about, our ability to make our own decisions. So just now we talked about how we want to be able to relate the elements within the captain that will actually influence the elements of his sailboat. I will use the example of resilience, kekentalan dalaman diri kita, and how we want to be able to relate the elements of ourselves as a captain to the sailboat. So in this situation, making use of social support. If, for example, we want to be able to have other boats help us when we are faced with challenging situations, then we will actually take advantage of other boats so that then they can help us to overcome the challenges that we have in our journey or in our way to make to the destination, which will then increase our levels of resilience. This is the first example. The second example is when we are dealing with internal stressors or triggers. So this will actually look at the leak of the sailboat. Like I mentioned just now, how we then able to take action to address the leak of the boat, because maybe if we do not take action for the leaks of the boat, then the boat might sink. Boat mungkin akan tenggelam. Jadi kalau kita, if we are able to actually make actions to be able to address the leak, then we are able to then increase our levels of resilience as well. The third example is when we are dealing with external stressors. And in this element of the sailboat is represented by the weather. How we then are able to deal with uncontrollable circumstances will actually help to influence, and if they are dealt properly, it will then help us to increase our levels of resilience. And lastly, when we are actually want to be able to cognitively reappraise stressful events as less threatening. So this will be the element of the thought within the captain and the element of the sailboat that is represented by the weather. How the captain interpret, how the captain evaluate, and what are the beliefs that the captain has that are associated with the weather that is actually affecting the sailboat. So if the captain is able to actually look at his thoughts more properly, then it will also help to increase the levels of resilience. So the advantages when we look at the sailboat metaphor, it offers a safe way for us to describe our experience, and it also will actually provide a more holistic view of ourselves rather than putting a focus on a particular element. For example, the leak. It will also allow us to take another perspective. We call it a meta perspective on ourselves. So essentially speaking, when we actually able to relate our functioning, our well-being to, for example, something external, in this particular example, to a sailboat, then we are able to look at our issues, for example, our well-being in general, in a more holistic view. And then we are able to look it more objectively, so that then we are able to address any leaks. We are able to address maybe the steering wheel has a little bit of alignment issues. Maybe the compass is playing a little bit of going haywire. We are able to look at each of the element of our well-being more objectively. So those are the advantages, kelebihan-kelebihan tentang metafora kapal layar ini. So I will touch briefly on the third key component of the sailboat metaphor, which is the lighthouse ataupun rumah api. If we can imagine the purpose and the function of the lighthouse, it is actually a temporary aid on the journey of the sailboat. It operates in service of the boat's journey. The lighthouse will clarify the current position of the boat. It also clarifies the environment of the boat. So this is essentially trying to make us further understand that we have ourselves, we are the captain of our sailboat. So maybe there might be guidance that we receive, maybe there might be some information, there might be some feedback that we receive from other people, like the lighthouse, but we are the one who will then interpret the information, the feedback that we receive from the lighthouse to then make action and influence our sailboat. If we look at this picture, maybe some of us might actually perceive other people as a rescue boat, whereby, as we can see on the picture, it is attaching a rope to the sailboat, and then the rescue boat will just take the sailboat wherever it wants to go. But it is actually not true, because this is the true purpose of the lighthouse. It will provide, okay, so this is where you are at the moment. So you are the captain. How do you then want to evaluate? How do you then want to interpret the information that you receive? Because you are the captain of the sailboat. You receive the information, you receive the guidance, you receive the feedback, you will then make your own decision, so that then your sailboat will be able to travel safely. So this is what the sailboat metaphor is, and this is the first objective that I would like to share with you in tonight's webinar. So the second aim that I hope I will be able to share with you today is about then looking at stresses. In particular, we'll actually look at understanding psychological distress. Okay, Bisyri, boleh nampak ke?
Boleh bang, boleh nampak.
Boleh Okay, terima kasih. Okay, so I will not, there are different types as well in terms of stress. I will touch briefly on it. There are eustress, that is positive stress. There are acute stress. There are distress. So there are a lot of stress, different types of stress. And we will look at the ways of managing psychological challenges later. But it is actually quite important and crucial when we say things to ourselves. For example, maybe usually and at the moment we might say, saya rasa stress lah, I feel stress lah. But then just now, although I only provide a brief overview about different types of stress, maybe if we are actually saying, oh, I am feeling eustress, it's actually a positive stress. Or maybe I am actually feeling distress, that means we are actually facing some sort of difficulties. So those are the types of stress. But what I would like to do for the purpose of this webinar is to straight away briefly discuss with you about understanding psychological distress. So psychological distress, it is a set of painful mental and physical symptoms that are associated with normal fluctuations of mood in most people. Bisyri, slide bergerak kan?
Yes bang, slide bergerak.
Okay, thank you Bisyri. So the accumulation of the psychological distress may, for some people, will then contribute to him or her developing different types of mental health conditions or psychological disorders. For example, major depressive disorder. This is a formal word. The usual word that we hear is depression, or in the kemurungan, anxiety disorders. This will be social phobia or OCD, or generalized anxiety disorder. Those are the types of anxiety disorders. To have bipolar disorders of the psychological distress that the person experiences accumulated over time. So it is basically what psychological distress is about. Now, I would actually like to share with you because I think perhaps there might be some of the attendees who might wonder, maybe there might be some tips and techniques that he or she might want to hear about how he or she can manage the challenges, the difficulties that he or she faces in their life. So in terms of the ways to manage the psychological challenges for the purpose of my webinar, I have divided it into 3 areas. Number 1 is in terms of our thoughts, our cognition. Number 2, which you can see is quite big, is in terms of our feelings and emotions. And number 3 is in terms of our actions or behaviors. So let's look at the first way in terms of managing our psychological challenges. This particular way, we call it as clouds in the sky. So what I would like for you to try and do right now, if possible, your cooperation is highly appreciated, since this is a practice that I hope can be done on a regular basis, because it will actually help us. Like I said just now, when it comes to thoughts, which is one of the elements within the captain, it is actually quite important to look at these thoughts as thoughts, because they are not problematic in itself. The way we perceive about the thought is actually more problematic. So coming back to this particular exercise or activity, which is called clouds in the sky. So if we take a few moments to imagine, I think maybe because of the nighttime situation that we are in at the moment, maybe it might be easier for us to imagine. But if we can imagine, we are at the moment walking along the park and it is a sunny day. So as there are not a lot of people on the ground, the grass is so comfortable. So we decide, what the heck? I want to actually lie down on the grass. So we decide to lie down on the grass. When we lie down on the grass and open our eyes, we will actually look into the sky. And there are clouds within the sky. So we spend a few minutes to look at the clouds that are in the sky. We see that the clouds, they are moving from our eyesight into our eyesight, and sooner or later out of our eyesight. That is the natural progression of the clouds. But then there is one particular cloud that we see at that moment that for some reason we want to pay attention to that cloud. So we then pay attention to that cloud. Okay, I am actually looking at this cloud. Oh, it has a little bit of a different darker bluish type of color. And for some reason, this particular cloud looked like a face of my sister. Interesting, interesting. And then the arch, lekop, the awan ni, the arch this in this cloud. Oh, okay. There are actually a lot of arches in this cloud. Interesting, interesting. Okay, okay. But sooner or later, this particular cloud that we paid attention earlier will also move out of our eyesight. So coming back to the reality now, and coming back to the way of actually handling or managing our psychological challenges, clouds, those equal to thoughts, awan bersamaan dengan pemikiran. And therefore, just like clouds, they are constantly moving from our eyesight into our eyesight, out of our eyesight. Thoughts do not equal to facts or reality. They will only become facts when we pay attention to the thoughts that we want to pay attention to. So another way for me to explain this is that we may not have control about the frequency, about the type of the thoughts that come into our mind, but we do have control about choosing which particular thought that we want to pay attention to. Just like clouds in the sky. If we don't want to pay attention to any clouds, okay, don't pay attention to it. But if there is, for some reason, a particular cloud that has a distinct feature that make us become attracted to this particular cloud, then pay attention to it. Just like the thoughts, if we believe a particular thought is going to be beneficial for us, then pay attention to it. But if we believe that, oh, okay, you know what, I don't think I am going to do something beneficial or helpful as a result of the particular thought, okay, I am going to say goodbye to you. So that is the ability that we have in terms of managing the psychological challenges in terms of our thoughts. The second part is in terms of our emotion. So there is this concept that I learned that is called emotional agility. So sometimes we might feel stuck. When we feel stuck, maybe we might want to ask ourselves 3 questions if we want to actually incorporate more emotional agility into our life. Number 1, what is my emotion trying to tell me? Number 2, am I treating myself with kindness? And number 3, what is one step that I can take to address this issue? Emotional agility is basically to be able to be engaged, to be able to be in touch with our emotions, with curiosity, and then hopefully be able to take values connected steps. So essentially, we do not need to be, like I said, let's abandon the idea of being fearless just now. In this particular situation, we do not need to be perfect, or we do not need to banish our negative emotions, but we do need to address our thought patterns and behaviors that stop us from flourishing. And for example, these are the elements of how we want to actually gain emotional agility. There are 4 elements of getting emotional agility. Number 1 is in terms of showing up. Showing up means facing into our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors willingly, with curiosity and kindness. Some of these thoughts and emotions are valid and appropriate to the moment. Others are all bits stuck in our psyche. Like maybe there might be some particular song that we've been trying to get out of our head for weeks. Doesn't matter, because in either case, whether accurate reflections of reality or harmful distortions, these thoughts and emotions are part of who we are, and we can learn to work with them and move out. That is the first element of how do we want to gain emotional agility. The second element is stepping out. This next element, after we face our thoughts and emotions, then it is about detaching from them and observing them to see them for what they are. Just thoughts, just emotions. Because by doing this, we then are able to create a non-judgmental space between our feelings and how we respond to them. We can then also identify difficult feelings as we are experiencing them and find more appropriate ways of reacting. Detached observations will keep our transient mental experiences from controlling us. So basically, the broader view we gain by stepping out, it means we are learning to see ourselves, for example, as the chessboard, filled with possibilities rather than as any one piece on the board that are confined to certain preordained moves. The third element is walking your why. Walking your why means after we have uncluttered and calmed our mental processes a little bit and then created the space we need between our thoughts and ourselves, we can then begin to focus more on what we are really about, our personal values, our steering wheel, recognizing, accepting, and then distancing ourselves from the scary or painful or destructive emotional stuff will actually give us the ability to engage more of the take the long view part of us, which integrates thinking and feeling with long-term values and aspirations that can help to find new and better ways for us to get there. We make thousands of decisions every day. Should we go for a walk? Should we go for a trip? Or should we take the call from the friend who hurt our feelings or send him a voicemail? So all these small decisions moment are our decisions making. Our core values will then provide the compass that keep us moving into the right direction. And the last one is about moving on. So one of the principle, if we can imagine a gymnast, if they want to go on the pole, then the gymnast will then need to be able to flex herself or himself so that then he or she can move effortlessly. He or she can be flexible so that then he is able to stay on course, to stay balanced, so that then he or she doesn't fall down. So we too need to find the balance between challenge and competence so that then we are able to actually be excited, enthusiastic, and invigorated by challenges. Uh, I heard this before from one of my patients when uh, he shared that his father actually asked him, "So, tell me how you feel today." That is the question that the father asked, how he felt today. The question wasn't meant to encourage his child to push to the limits, but it is actually to let them know that it is actually okay. It's not about demoralizing him, but it's actually to encourage his child to push the limits and feel that it is okay, even admirable to stumble when trying something new and difficult. So that is essentially what emotional agility is about. So the last bit that I would like to share with you is in terms of how sometimes we might feel uncomfortable with a lot of things and sometimes we tend to avoid. But this is a saying that I wish I could share with you. That is, discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life. Essentially speaking, if we want to actually pay or want to be able to enjoy a certain tourist attraction, the thing that we need to do is to actually pay some money. And after we only take the discomfort of paying the money, then only then we are able to reap the benefits of the tourist attraction and the rewards, the benefits of the hotel that we are staying, for example. So the last way that I would like to share with you is in terms of the behaviors. And in this particular situation is about how we are able to take a 5-5-5 breathing technique. So essentially what this 5-5-5 breathing technique is, it is about taking a deep breath from our nose, inhaling from our nose for about 4 to 5 seconds, and then holding our breath for about 4 to 5 seconds, and then exhaling our breath through our mouth for about 4 to 5 seconds. So in total, it will be in about 15 seconds. And if we do it 4 times, then it would mean that we will be doing it for 1 minute. So the more we are able to engage in this particular breathing exercise, the more it will actually help us to be calm and stay in the present moment. So I believe that is all for this particular information gathering session. I hope it has been beneficial and insightful to all of you. So essentially, to recap, to summarize, I like to do a little bit of summary as well before I end my webinar or whenever I see my patients. Essentially, tonight we had a little bit of a discovery just now when most of us responded that we have never even thought about taking care of our mental health. And then we actually look into the sailboat metaphor, and then we actually look into the psychological distress as well as ways of managing our psychological challenges. So I hope it has been beneficial and helpful to all of you. And if there are any clarification, feel free to ask for this particular session of Q&A. Thank you very much. Bishri, over to you.
Thank you, Abang Khairul, for the a very informative sharing session on mental health. There are a few questions being asked in the message box.
Yep.
So the first question would be how to overcome burnout and bounce back from the lose hope of feelings.
Yep. So just now we spoke about in terms of action, if we want to refer back to the element of the sailboat. And if we also look at weather, we know that one of the contributors to us feeling burnt out or to us feeling quite challenged as a result of these external circumstances, they are represented by the weather. And therefore, to answer this particular question, maybe we can actually look at the elements of the sailboat that can actually help us to be able to address and to be able to deal with these external circumstances that are actually influencing and making us feeling burnt out. So, for example, if we actually feeling burnt out because maybe we tend to look more into our emotions. Oh, okay, I am feeling exhausted. I am feeling tired. I am feeling maybe angry as a result of what's been happening at the moment with the pandemic, and therefore it is resulting me in feeling burnt out. Okay, so this is the signal. This is what I receive from my compass. Is there actually something that I can do about it? Is there something that I can actually try and actually find the purpose or look into my steering wheel? Actually look into, oh, okay, what actually drives me? Maybe I am feeling burnt out because I actually value helping people so much that as a result of that, it's actually making me feel burnt out because it actually feels so endless. I want to help people, but then because of these external circumstances, I am feeling burnt out. So maybe one of the ways that we can look at that is actually look at the other elements of the sailboat of our well-being, so that then maybe we can then find the answer of addressing the burnout.
Okay, thank you. The next question would be apa beza panic attack dengan anxiety attack?
Oh, so panic attack and anxiety attack is just essentially they are similar, but in terms of the interpretation or where and how we actually use in different types of situations. Kalau biasanya kita akan relate panic attack or anxiety attack ni dengan we call it physical symptoms. Physical symptoms ni it could be kadang-kadang kita akan rasa pipi kita merah, ataupun kadang-kadang kita akan rasa tangan kita berpeluh, ataupun kadang-kadang kita rasa macam bibir kita shaking, tangan menggeletar, ataupun bibir rasa berkerak, kering. So these are what we call the symptoms. It's actually signaling us that we are actually feeling panicky, maybe to a situation, maybe being in an open space or maybe in an enclosed space. So it's actually making us feeling those kinds of symptoms, which is essentially a panic or an anxiety attack.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the following question is from Nurul Izian Ismani. So the question is how to know when to seek professional help for stress management,
Yeah.
and then how to spot the signs and symptoms if we are under too much stress.
That's a good question. I feel that in terms of when do we seek help, if we actually feel that at the moment, at the very least, we feel that if we express those problems, maybe if we feel that if we share to our closest friends ke, family members ke, we may feel that maybe dia orang rasa overwhelmed kot. So if we feel that they might feeling overwhelmed, then there are a lot of resources nowadays, especially. Uh, for example, talian kasih, befrienders, dari Jakim pun ada sekarang. So there are a lot of ways that we can actually, if we feel that we are getting to that point, oh, saya rasa macam, oh, tak boleh dah ni. Tak boleh dah ni, memang kena betul-betul communicate dengan orang ni. So that is then the moment we then actually seek help. So that's why, for the purpose of tonight's webinar, I have focused more on understanding ourselves rather than looking at external factors. Because when we actually get to know ourselves, when we actually be more compassionate, when we actually are kind to ourselves, then it will also help us to understand if we are reaching to a certain tipping point, which will then encourage us or signal us to actually seek help.
Thank you for the answer. The next question is from Anik Haikal. So his question is it normal for our range of age to have a thin layer of patience?
What level of patience? Sorry, Haikal?
A thin.
A thin. Oh,
yeah.
okay. So this particular question, if we actually heard about instant gratification, instant gratification ni maksudnya, contoh our generation nowadays, we have information at the tip of our hand. We are able to seek information straight away by going to Twitter, by going to Facebook. So we have the information straight away at the tip of our hand. And when it comes to instant gratification, it can also lead to address the question. Sometimes we might have lower levels of patience sebab kita dah terbiasa dengan semua benda ni dah pantas. Macam kalau kat Australia, we have 5G. We have all those internet connection very very fast. Tak perlu tunggu loading seminit baru nak keluar. So all those information, and then it will actually lead us to have a certain expectation. I want this, I will get this. If I not get this, I will feel maybe that will actually make me become more impatient, or that will make me become more angry, because we are so used to this particular instant. Nak dapat je dapat, nak dapat je dapat. Kalau tak dapat, then mungkin dia sepanas baran. So that is maybe the observation yang I also see in terms of the difference between different generations lah. Because we are, majority of us are in the same generation, and even we are growing up, there are already mobile phones, although lebih besar, tapi dari segi internet connection apa semua tu dah semakin meluas waktu tu. Jadi kesabaran pun mungkin agak terkesan because of this. So yes, it can have an impact on that, Anik Haikal. Yes.
So the next question is from Diana Zaha. So what do we do when we see someone who is having a panic attack?
Okay. So I think this one, maybe this shows that she wants to help maybe someone she knows who is shares with you that he or she is currently experiencing a panic attack. So one of the first thing that we can do as someone who is helping is asking, okay, is there anything that you need? Is there anything that you need that can help to feel you at least comfortable with where you are right now? At least. Because, you are not a helping professional, you are not a psychologist, you are not a doctor, you are not a counselor, you are just there as maybe a friend or a sister, a relative. So you want to be able to reduce the level of discomfort that is currently facing that particular person. So, okay, is there anything I can do? Do you want water? Do you want to go back to the car? Do you want to, be somewhere else? That kind of thing, to make sure that that person is actually is at least comfortable. Paling kurang pun, just now I shared about the deep breathing technique. So okay, let's do a breathing technique together, whoever it is. Also, let's do a breathing technique together. Okay, let's try to find a quiet place. Okay, so let's take a deep breath from our nose. 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's hold our breath. So like that. So encouraging us so that then the person can feel a little bit more at ease. That is one of the ways that we can do as someone who is helping the other person who is currently experiencing a panic attack.
Okay. So the next question is a very spicy one, I guess. So it's from Azwin Zamri. Um, the question is, how do we respond to people who see mental disorders as a lack of religious beliefs or practice?
Oh, yes. So it is quite spicy. So can you repeat one more question, Bishri?
Repeat the
Okay.
question again.
Yep.
Yeah, so how do we respond to people who see mental disorders as lack of religious belief or practice?
Yep. So I share this from my own professional experience, and in terms of this particular belief, usually it comes from the older generation, from the parents. For example, in the situations that I face in my current practice, uh, usually the patients that I see, although they themselves want to help, or Muslims lah, in this particular situation, they want to help themselves. They know that they are experiencing emotions and life difficulties that are making them usually feeling depressed or having depression. But then a lot of people, for example, their parents say, oh ni malas je ni, mungkin mungkin tak mengaji, tak baca yasin, or tak selalu berdoa, tak selalu solat 5 waktu sehari semalam, because those practice, they are part of our faith. But when it comes to our mental well-being, as we have learned, there are a lot of other elements that are intertwined that will actually have an impact on our well-being. Faith and religion is a thing, yes, and it is good. Maybe for us as a Muslim, we have a faith, we have a belief that we know sometimes will have an impact on our well-being, for example. But there are still other elements within us that will have an impact on our well-being. Tak kisah sama ada agama itu memain peranan ataupun tidak. Jadi, what I usually do when parents come, usually in the first few sessions, the parents will accompany their children. I will provide them with information. Oh, pakcik, makcik, sebenarnya apa yang anak pakcik tengah mengalami sekarang, I share with them in a way that will at least try to make them understand, and try to make them see that mental health and religion, they are in a way not together. They can be together, but at the same time they can also be something that is going as a parallel. You can have a good faith, you can have a strong belief about the religion, and you can also have maybe a strong and a good positive well-being, but you may also have the macam tu kan. So it can be either way. So in terms of, maybe it might be difficult because they are in a way their mindset has been so stuck or so strong in that way, but at the very least, at the end of the day, there are other boats. There are other people, and we ourselves, we have our own boat. If we believe, I know I am a religious person, I am someone who prays 5 times a day, I am someone who does all the compulsory things as a Muslim, but I am also facing all these life difficulties, I am also facing these emotional challenges, and I am trying as best as I can to improve these life challenges, so that then maybe if I am right here at the moment, I can actually try as best as I can to go up as a parallel thing. So I hope, without making, too much controversial statements, hopefully that can actually have a little bit of a neutral observation, and trying to make others, maybe older generations, understand about the concept of mental health.
So the next question is from Amir Abdul Samad. So soalannya lah, macam mana nak bantu a person yang ada mental issue?
Okay. So pertama sekali mungkin setelah menghadiri, after attending this webinar, maybe we can look at, okay, what are the usual symptoms for the usual mental health condition that we usually hear in this country. Maybe the most common one nowadays is depression. Okay. So maybe I want to increase my knowledge in terms of maybe identifying what are the symptoms of depression. Okay, so I have already learned, I have already read through at the very least all the key symptoms of depression. And then maybe ada kebetulan this particular friend, maybe they are picturing or they are depicting certain traits and symptoms of depression. And then what we can do, in Australia, there is this particular question that we can simply ask, are you okay? Are you okay? So by actually posing the questions whether or not they are okay, then maybe they can express, you know what, I am actually not feeling okay. Okay. So and then we can maybe take time to understand the issues, memberikan meminjamkan telinga empati, and then maybe we can, okay, so how about then if you can try to seek help or get in touch with the appropriate professional, because yelah, saya cuma kawan je, maybe I don't have that much information and knowledge. So, okay, I do have actually a few contacts that maybe you want to get in touch with. Okay, then give the contacts to that particular person. So those are the ways that we can help others who might be experiencing mental health difficulties at the time.
And then the next question is from Aun Zulfaka. Her question is it normal to feel overwhelmed every single day?
Is it normal to feel overwhelmed every single day? So if whoever whoever yang tanya soalan tu, it will be helpful for us to then look into ourselves. Why am I feeling overwhelmed every single day? Is it because I haven't truly answered the question, what is the purpose of my life? And maybe that is why it's contributing to me feeling overwhelmed. Why am I feeling overwhelmed every single day? Is it because my motivation at the moment about certain elements or certain things in my life is actually not being answered properly? Or is it something else that will actually is currently still making me feel overwhelmed every single day? So to answer your question, when it comes to normal or not normal, it depends on us, If we feel overwhelmed every single day, maybe in general population, they might say, that might be not in the normal sort of range. But in neutral, it is actually depend on us. If we say, and if we look into ourselves and ask ourselves why we are feeling overwhelmed every single day, then maybe we might then try to uncover certain things that can help us to then get out of the loop of being and getting overwhelmed every single day. So be curious, be compassionate, be kind to ourselves, asking ourselves why we are feeling this emotion. Just now, saya tak sempat nak kongsikan one of the ways that we can actually be and interacting with ourselves. Kebiasaannya kita selalu cakap, I am sad, I am angry, I am happy, I am blessed, I am grateful. If we say that, it's like we are identifying ourselves with that emotion. But if we try to actually change the way we say things, for example, I am feeling sad, I am feeling overwhelmed. That is the space yang saya cakap tadi, that is the space that we create between ourselves and the emotion. And that particular space that we have created will then help us to look into that particular feeling with more curiosity, with more compassion, with more kindness, so that then we might be able to uncover certain things that actually make us feeling that way. So I strongly encourage for all of us to try, instead of saying I am sad, I am angry, I am disgusted, try and say I am feeling, so that then what we say is actually not us. We are not identifying ourselves. We are not identifying ourselves with that emotion. We are just signaling, we are just feeling that particular emotion. That is an emotion. That is a source of information, and that is a data. So it is important for us to create that space for that, then for us to be able to look into our emotions more deeply.
Boleh, sorry mencela boleh?
Boleh, boleh.
Boleh?
Boleh jadi ke sebab rasa macam we should done more, kita boleh buat lebih lagi. Maksudnya, you know, the feelings of tak puas hati dengan diri sendiri. You know, saya rasa boleh ke jadi macam tu?
Boleh, sebab that one can be contributed to that feelings of perfectionism, for example. So if we strive for excellence, one of our values is striving for perfection. Just now we achieve, they can both be beneficial and they can also be maladaptive. They can also be something that can have an impact on our well-being. So if we put too much focus on striving for perfectionism, then maybe we can imagine that maybe our work life maybe will be a little bit affected, because kalau ada due date, maybe we might extend that due date because we don't feel 100% satisfied. It's like if I'm not satisfied, the work is gone. It's like black or white lah. Maksudnya kalau tak puas hati, tak nak hantar, because of that value of perfectionism. So yes, that can be also one of the values that we have, but at the same time, looking at the situations, tak salah untuk melihat kesempurnaan. Contohnya solat, we want to be able to strive for perfection, because kalau solat tak sempurna, mungkin pahala kurang, contohnya kan. So, the values can be adaptive and maladaptive. So looking at how the value can actually have an impact on our well-being. So striving for perfection, it can actually be adaptive and maladaptive at the same time. Does that answer your question, Ani? Haikal?
Okay. So the next question would be, what can we do or help kalau ada someone yang mengadu to us that they want to commit suicide due to problems in life lah, such as depression or stress.
Yep. So this is currently a big thing kan, like I mentioned just now. At the moment, I usually encourage when people talk about suicide, usually we say committing suicide. But I would like to encourage for us if we can actually say completing suicide. Instead of saying committing suicide, if we can actually say completing suicide, it's like we are trying to make sure that we do not want to judge that person. Oh, why do you want to commit suicide? Maybe that person is very, very distressed. It is very, very facing quite challenging situations at that moment, that he or she feels that he or she wants to complete suicide. So, coming back to that question after I explain this, when a person says they want to straight away make sure that the environment that he or she is in is as safe as it can be. Contohnya kalaulah tu housemate kita kan, then maybe we want to ensure that all the sharp items are being kept away, like knife or scissors or any sharp items, so that then the accessibility of our friend to commit suicide will be reduced. That's number one, ensuring a safe place, so that then that person will not further pursue with the plan of completing suicide. And then number two is to actually be there, asking what is going on. What are the things that are actually making him or her feeling that life is not worth living, feeling that life is too much, that he or she wants to complete suicide. So listen to them, and at the same time, kalau ada kawan lain, kalau ada kawan lain, then ask that kawan lain to maybe call the hospital, the nearby 999, untuk maklumkan yang sekarang ada situasi yang di mana ada seorang ingin cuba untuk complete suicide. Kalau tak ada orang, it's just you, then be there for him or her, and then at the end of the conversation, boleh tak ask for permission, boleh tak I want to keep you safe, and boleh tak kalau saya nak hubungi 999 supaya awak tak kisahlah apa, boleh mendapatkan bantuan yang sewajarnya, macam itu. So those are the things that we can do when we want to help others who at the time feels that it's too much, life's not worth living, that they want to complete suicide. So I hope that answers the question. But yeah, suicide is a big thing at the moment because of the challenging situation of the pandemic. So if there is any more question about suicide itself, maybe Bisyri can we can get in touch afterwards, Bisyri, so that I can maybe provide further information about this particular topic lah.
So the next question is from Yanaza. So what if after kita dah cari the root of our overwhelmness and we still don't know what to do?
Okay, but good job, because you have actually found the root cause that is making you feeling overwhelmed. So that is a good first step. And then once we have identified the root cause, try to then, as a captain, try to then look into the elements of our well-being, so that then we can look, oh, okay, so the root cause of me feeling overwhelmed is X. How can I actually influence, now that I have identified the root cause of X, maybe to my steering wheel? Is there anything that I can do in terms of the values that I have at the moment to be able to then address this particular root cause that is making me feeling overwhelmed? Or is the root cause that is making me feeling overwhelmed is because I pay too much attention to my leaks, to my weaknesses? Oh, okay, maybe I am paying attention too much to my weaknesses that actually make me to have this particular root cause. Oh, okay, now I know that the leak is not the only thing in my sailboat. There is actually a lot of other things. Maybe if I can try to focus on my strengths, what are the strengths that I have, what are the values that I have, maybe that can also help me to then understand, to then help to address the root cause that is making me feeling overwhelmed. But certainly it deserves a pat on the back. Good job for identifying, for be compassionate, be curious, and coming to the root cause that is making us feeling overwhelmed. And then try to look at the other elements of our sailboat, the elements that are impacting our human functioning, our well-being, so that then we can actually help to look at understanding and addressing the root cause of us feeling overwhelmed to the elements of our well-being.
So hopefully that answers the question. So the next question is what is the difference between OCD and OCPD?
Okay, so OCD, as I think some of us already know, is obsessive compulsive disorder. OCPD is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So that is the in terms of the distinction. Kalau kita nak kata OCD ni, dia dalam bahagian, kalau ikut DSM-5 sekarang ni, dia dalam bahagian obsessive and compulsive related disorders. So in terms of these two disorders, the main distinction is in terms of the personality. As we know, the second OCPD is in personality disorder. But for obsessive compulsive disorder itself, traditionally and classically, It is about the obsessions or the compulsions. Obsessions kepada pemikiran, compulsions kepada perlakuan. Tak tertumpu kepada personality daripada OCPD. OCPD ada kesan terhadap personality dia yang menyebabkan dia ada OCPD. Untuk OCD, dia lebih kepada apa yang menyebabkan dia mempunyai certain obsessions or certain compulsions that make him or her behave in certain ways. So those two are the main distinctions. Of course, there are other things that that differentiate OCD and OCPD, but in terms of the main distinction for this particular purpose of webinar, it is that type of differences.
Okay, there seems to be no more questions on the message box, but I do have a...
Hello, hi.
Okay,
Sorry, Bisyri. Sorry.
Okay,
Hi, hello, Assalamualaikum. Mr. Khairul Arif and the rest of friends over here. So I have, thank you for your insightful information regarding the philosophical point of views. It was a very informational one. So there are two questions that I want to ask, which are somewhat related to the things that you have shared just now. The first question is that what do you think is the main factor of emotional maturity, based on your maybe personal point of view and also your expertise? And then the second one is, can emotional maturity affect the tendency of committing suicide? And the last question is that how to achieve emotional maturity and to maintain it, because let's be real, in order to pursue our life better, we have to take care of our mental health and actually achieve the emotional maturity, right?
Yep.
So it will affect the rest of aspects in our lives. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. So when we talk about emotional maturity and in terms of factors that influence our emotional maturity, experiences certainly is a factor. That's the first one. The way we deal with the experiences is the second one. And these experiences are more in the category of setbacks. How do we actually deal with the setbacks will actually have an impact on our emotional maturity. In other words, I tend to view emotional maturity as resilience. So that's why I started my introduction or the session of tonight's webinar in terms of kekentalan dalaman diri, resilience. If we are able to have and to increase our levels of resilience by addressing the setbacks, the challenges that we have in ways that we feel, I feel empowered, I feel enriched as a result of these setbacks and these challenges that I face. Not only will that help to increase our levels of resilience, but also our emotional maturity. Because, I have shared earlier in terms of how I dealt with the passing of my late father when I was a teenager. That is a very big loss. That is a very big stressful life event that I faced when I was a teenager. If I faced it in a way that maybe I would not be here today, then maybe I would be in a different direction. Maybe in terms of my levels of resilience facing similar challenges, because a few years ago, I also lost a close friend of mine when he completed suicide. So that is one of the significant life events that happened to me personally. But then, because I already faced the loss of my late father when I was a teenager, it helped me to deal with the loss of my friend a few years ago when he completed suicide a little bit better. When I say a little bit better, it didn't mean that I didn't feel sad, I didn't cry. No, I still cried. I still felt sad. I still felt all those emotions, because it's a normal. It's appropriate for me to feel all those emotions in that situation, because that situation warranted me to feel all those emotions. But because of the maturity that I developed, because of the way that I faced with the challenge that I had many years ago, I was able to deal with this particular setback a little bit more appropriately. So that is one of the ways that I was able to increase my emotional maturity. The next thing, when we talk about resilience, is that the thoughts, coming back to the elements of the captain, how we interpret, how we evaluate what are the beliefs that we have in terms of the weather, in terms of the other boats, in terms of the leaks that we have. Those also will play an important role in terms of increasing our emotional maturity. So all those things will have an impact on our emotional maturity. I think maybe some of us might hear, oh, he's young, his age is maybe 23, 24, 25, but in terms of the way he thinks, it's certainly much more than that particular numerical age that he or she has. So that maybe is also an indicator that maybe that person has developed an emotional maturity that is not at the level that maybe the other 24, 25-year-old people might have at the time, because of the way he dealt with life setbacks, challenges, difficulties in his years of growing up. Upbringing also will play a factor, of course. How the familial environment, how he or she deals with the situation at school. But still, at the end of the day, dealing with setbacks, dealing with life difficulties, that will have an important role in terms of increasing and affecting the emotional maturity. So does that answer your question, Ms. Afrina? Or do you have any follow-up questions with regards to that?
Yes. That was very insightful. Thank you, Mr. Khairul.
No problem.
Okay, so any other questions?
Hello. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
Okay. Assalamualaikum Cik Khairul. I'm Shakira. I have a questions. Okay. As we all know, this question is regarding suicide. Okay. As we all aware, attempt to commit suicide is an offense under our Malaysian law. So and if someone is found guilty under this offense, he can be fined or imprisoned up to 1 year. So what's your personal opinion of our law, and do you think that this law is actually supposed to be amended or something? Yeah,
Thank you
that's
for
my
your
question.
thank you for the question, Shakira. Much appreciated. So I felt grateful and blessed because I pursued my tertiary education at a country whereby mental health was a big thing. Mental health was advocated. Mental health, in terms of the discrimination and the stigma, is very low. I mean, compared to our country. So when it comes to the topic of suicide, and my opinion, I'm still, I have my own association, not my own, but I belong to an association, a few associations here in Malaysia that advocates the amendment of this particular act, because suicide is not, it's not a crime. It is an act, it is a behavior that that person decided to do at the time, because he or she found that life is overwhelming. Maybe life was not worth living, and therefore he or she decided to complete suicide. So yes, to answer your question, number one is I am, trying as best as I can to do my part. I only came back home last year, so I try as best as I can to, to contribute and to share my expertise, my experience and knowledge to the community as much as I can. And part of that is also trying to amend this particular law so that then, because this is also a stigma. Stigma is actually the way people see this is something disgraceful. So yes, suicide is still a very big stigma here in Malaysia, and thereby the act was introduced many, 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 many years ago, and now the situation has changed. It's becoming a big thing. Mental health is becoming a big thing in Malaysia, which I think is a blessing in a disguise. Despite the pandemic, because of the pandemic, kalau tak ada pandemic ni, maybe the topic of mental health might still be the same like a few years ago. But because of the pandemic and because of the challenges arises from the pandemic, mental health has become such a big thing. There has been an increased number, although they may be unreported, but there has been an increased number of cases of people completing suicide. You know, and it's becoming a big thing, and we hope, I certainly hope that this particular law will be amended. Kalau pernah dengar tentang Relate Malaysia, there's also MMHA, there's other NGOs at the moment that are advocating for this particular law to be amended, because if it is a law, and when it comes to this particular topic of suicide, it means that it's still being stigmatized. It's still being discriminated, because we know this is something that can actually be prevented. It is something that can actually be addressed long before that person, or maybe that person has already reached that point of feeling that the life is not worth living, but still it is something that can be addressed, because when it comes to mental health, it's not something that will stay there for forever. It's like a cycle. Kadang-kadang ada perkara-perkara yang membuatkan kita berada di atas roda, kadang-kadang ada perkara-perkara yang membuatkan kita berada di bawah roda. So it's like a cycle. That is our mental health. But if we are at the bottom of the cycle, at least we know that we can get back up, rather than doubting ourselves, feeling sorry for ourselves. Oh, I'm not going to get back up. Oh, I'm useless. Oh, I feel hopeless. I feel, hopefully by, therapy, by seeking help, it can actually help that person to know that, oh, there is actually light at the end of the tunnel. There is actually way that I can actually get back up, despite me being at the top, or despite me being at the bottom of the cycle at the moment. Does that answer your question, Ms. Shakira?
Yeah. Thank you, Encik Khairul.
You're welcome.
So you agree or not about maksudnya dengan macam yang Miss Shakira cakap tadi, should we teruskan ke, should we abolish the thing?
Because how do I respond to this? The reason I am a bit hesitant, Nick, to address this question is, at the end of the day, I am a public servant. So there are certain things that I may not be able to comment, because I work as a public servant, and therefore, there are things that I do on the background. Maybe that hopefully can answer your question. But there are things, because as a public servant, there are things that I am unable to comment further lah. So I sincerely hope you do understand that, because I still am abide by rules and regulations. But there are still things that I do on the background, and let's put it that way, to advocate, to increase awareness about this particular topic of mental health and suicide. Does that answer your question, Nani?
Yep.
Mr. Khairul, I have questions. Same. Follow up with Ms. Shakira's question.
Yep.
So, as far as you know, is there any other countries also implement the same act like us in Malaysia?
As far as I know, not to my knowledge, to be honest. But I may be wrong though, because I haven't looked further into it, in terms of whether this particular law is applicable or is being implemented in other countries. But what I think I can say for certain is that what we categorize as first world countries, like the UK, the USA, or Australia, or New Zealand, all those countries that we put categorized in the first world countries, I believe they do not have this particular law, because of the low levels of stigma and discrimination in mental health. Uh, yeah, I do not know for sure, Auni Zulfaka, about whether there are other countries that have similar laws. I hope not, but if there are, then hopefully changes can be made in those countries to be able to increase awareness and look at this particular topic of suicide as something that is more humane instead of something that is discriminatory or stigmatized.
All right, thank you very much, Cik Khairul.
Sorry.
Yep.
Answering to Auni's questions, actually there are many countries that before this, applying this law. Like our law is actually kita punya law ni actually based on Indian's law. So tapi disebabkan evolusi and then kita pun pandangan setengah masyarakat terhadap suicide telah pun berubah. Banyak negara yang telah amend law terhadap suicide ni dan diorang telah abolish. But we don't know our country pula bila nak berubah. Okay.
Yep. Oh, so at least we can actually say that. Oh, so there have been other countries that have actually amended, and because of the current situation and because of the levels of understanding and lower, decrease levels of stigma and discrimination about mental health in general, because suicide is under the umbrella of mental health, kan? So maybe we can actually use that as a hope, as a source of beacon to make change in our country. I think Auni Zulfaka wanted to add something when she unmuted her mic.
Oh yeah, I just want to say interesting sharing from Shakira.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you, Shakira. Much appreciated.
Yep. Thank you, Shakira.
Yeah. Thank you also, Cik Khairul and Auni.
Yep. You both made a good pair, a good duo. Are there any further questions? If not, I would also like to ask maybe a last question to Mr. Khairul. So I'll count to three lah. 1, 2, or 3. Okay. So Mama Khairul, I would like to ask you kind of an experience punya soalan lah. So like your sailboat metaphor, we are the captain of the ship lah, and that might be a bitter pill to swallow as well, because it means that you are alone and you can't really expect much from other people in terms of your mental health lah, basically. Yeah, so it's basically although you have help, macam you have friends, you have parents and all, but sometimes that support may not be enough for you lah. So that is quite a bitter pill to swallow for all of us. So my question would be, does mental health, can we correlate mental health dengan physical health, where macam physical health kita boleh improve in terms of kuatkan, sihatkan badan, all that. Dari segi mental health, are there any ways so that we can be more prepared in terms of if we are to be in those situations yang stress and depression? So are there any exercises or any ways so that we can be more mentally prepared and more stronger, so that we can, because life as we know it maybe can be worse and maybe can be better, and we don't know what will happen in the near future. So I would like to know if there are ways.
Sure.
for us to
Yeah. So the first comment that I would like to make in terms of this sailboat metaphor is, yes, on another perspective, it's like a bitter pill to swallow, because at the end, sometimes, by learning this metaphor, at the end of the day, we know that we are the captain of our sailboat. We are the captain, we are the person who influences and who determines the direction of our sailboat. Macam Mr. cakap, we have the lighthouse, for example, to give us guidance and information. We have other boats to also provide support, and maybe at the same time, sometimes the other boats may not be helpful as much still. But yes, on the other hand, that can also makes us feel lonely because we are that boat lah. We are the captain who is currently driving and powering through the sailboat. And that is why when I talked earlier discussing about this sailboat, that there are actually other elements of the sailboat, of our well-being, that will actually help us to feel empowered, that will actually say, oh, okay, there is a purpose in my life. A purpose means, for example, values. What do I believe in my life? What do I find most important in my life? Do I value honesty? Do I value sincerity? Do I value gratitude? Do I value humility? Do I value kindness? Do I value love of learning? Because if I value all those things, and if I do things that are aligned with what I believe, then it can actually help our life not to feel as lonely as we imagine, as we anticipate that it is. Yes, it is true that we are on our boat by ourselves, but we still have our sails that we need to adjust accordingly for the weather. We still have the leaks that we need to cover if there are leaks that prevent us from moving with our boat. We still have the destination that we need to figure out where we want to go. So these are the elements that can actually help us, at the same time to counter, you know what, I am alone, I feel alone. It is true. But what are the things that can actually help me to feel empowered? What are the things that I believe in my life that can actually help me to say, oh, you know what? There might be some benefits of me interacting with other boats. Oh, okay, now I do not feel so lonely. Oh, okay, now I have reached to a port, to a destination. Oh, okay, now I can actually take a bit of a rest. I can actually pat myself on the back because I have reached to this destination. That can actually help us to alleviate and address that feelings of loneliness when we are talking about this metaphor of the sailboat metaphor. And to the second question, in us, there are three things that is important for us to know. Number one is our thoughts. We have our mission. Number two, we have our emotions. And number three, we have our behaviors. So it's like a top-bottom process. Bagaimana cara untuk kita proses dan filter cara pemikiran kita akan mempengaruhi bagaimana perasaan kita, disebabkan perasaan kita itu, kita akan melakukan tingkah laku yang berkaitan. For example, if I actually heard a noise on the top of my house, dekat atas atap. So then I think to myself, when I heard the noise, I think to myself, mungkin kucing je kot berkeliaran atas rumah. Okay, so that is the process that I went through in my thoughts. Kucing ada lalu berkeliaran atas rumah. So when it goes down to my emotion, because I didn't feel any threat, I didn't feel any sensation that will make me feel dangerous, I just feel neutral. And as a result of me feeling neutral, I didn't do anything. But similar situation, if I heard a noise from the top of my house, from the roof, and then I say, oh, ada perompak. Kurang asap. Tak boleh jadi ni. Ada perompak. So disebabkan pemikiran saya bagi tahu ada perompak, it actually leads or influence my emotion to say, I feel I am in danger. I feel scared. I feel, I feel that I need to do something about it. So as a result of that emotion, it will actually lead me to ambil parang or, telefon 999 or do something to actually address that thought that we had in the first place yang mungkin ada perompak nak masuk rumah kita. So the way we process the stimuli, the way we actually think through things that are happening in us will actually have an impact for the rest of our elements, our emotions and our behaviors. So actually there are a lot of things that I do when I talk about when it comes to thoughts. I do one of the things is called cognitive restructuring. It's not like I do some surgery on the brain, but when I say cognitive restructuring, it's like I actually try to help my patients to identify, to recognize what we call cognitive distortions. So what are your unhelpful thinking styles? You know, we have black or white thinking. Black or white tu maksudnya black, all or nothing. Or we have jumping to conclusion. We have labeling. We have overgeneralization. We have magnification. We have a lot of other what we call cognitive distortions, you know, unhelpful thinking styles that we actually do on a regular basis. Mental filter, you know, all those unhelpful thinking styles that will actually have an impact on how we actually process our cognitive, which actually then have an impact on our emotions. So lepas saya dah buat identify the cognitive the distortions tu, then saya boleh actually try to then okay, so let's do maybe a thought record. So that is, you know, I don't want to tell too much about my therapy, but that is the things that I do in terms of addressing the thoughts. There are so many things lah that I wish I could share, but for the purpose of this webinar, I want to make it, you know, quite general. But those are the ways and techniques that we can do in terms of helping ourselves to be able to deal with the difficulties and challenges. One other thing, Bisyri, if I can just add, siapa boleh teka deria yang kita ada? Who can guess how many senses that we have? Okay, well done. Awesome, Anik. Can you share what the senses are?
Bau.
Okay, so that's from our nose. Anyone else?
Rasa.
Rasa, so taste, that's from our mouth. Thank you, Bisyri.
Sight.
Sight, so that's from our eyes. Awesome.
Ear.
Ear, so that's for us to listen. And skin, that's for us to touch. Thank you so much. So all these senses, the first thing that it will go through for us to make sense of the senses that we face will actually go to our mind. So mungkin benda biasa yang kita tengok mata lah. So mata akan nampak banyak sangat stimulan. Benda yang pertama yang akan terus pergi ialah pemikiran. Apa pemikiran kita interpret, apa pemikiran kita evaluate tentang apa yang kita saja baru nampak will actually then will have an impact on our emotion. Just like just now, when I shared about hearing, when I heard a noise coming from my roof. So I use the sensation of my ears, which actually then go up to my thoughts, which then will actually make me evaluate about what I just heard. And then it will actually go down to my emotion as a result of my processes from my thoughts. And as a result of my emotions, it will then actually affect me to behave in certain ways. So seperti yang kita tahu, kalau kita able-bodied, then we are not able to control all this deria-deria sensation yang kita terima. Maka amat penting untuk kita melihat dalam diri kita sendiri macam mana untuk kita proses pemikiran kita dan apa yang kita berlaku dan alami berkenaan dengan perasaan kita, di mana ia akan mempengaruhi tingkah laku ataupun perlakuan kita.
Thank you for the answer. It was very informative and well explained. So thank you. If there are no further questions, since it's already 11:30, we should wrap up the session now. So are there any questions? Last questions? No. Okay, no. Okay, so oh yeah.
Your brother join us ke tadi, sir?
Siapa nama dia, Anik?
Khairul Farhan, is it?
No.
Bukan. Tak ada ke?
Entah, saya tak perasan. Mungkin ada kot.
Saya rasa ada, pasal nama dia ada Khairul juga, ada Tengah, and then ada Razali.
Oh, I think rasanya ada.
Okay. So I guess you rapat dengan your brother.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I am quite close with all of my brothers. Macam Bisyri bagi tahu tadi, I am the youngest son. I have 4 older brothers, and alhamdulillah I am close with all of them, but I am closest with my the older one, the number 4. So yeah, he joined the session maybe yang tadi lah. So yes, good catch, Ali.
Nice. Good cognitive cognitive trait. Okay, so I think that's all for today. Thank you, Mr. Khairul, for your time. We highly appreciate your knowledge and your sharing session. And then like dah habis pun lambat kan, although it was supposed to end at 11, but I think we gained a lot from today, and I hope everyone is doing okay, and if not, then please let anyone let us know so that we can help you guys. You are not alone. We are all driving the boat. The boat.
That's right.
So,
Bisyri, on that note though, saya ada sebenarnya ada prepare slide sekejap boleh saya share sekejap?
boleh sekejap.
Sekejap sekejap je. Yang ni. Boleh nampak ke? Are you able to see?
Yep, boleh.
Yep. So this is the first one. I think you might know if you are following KKM page. So this is the talian sokongan psikososial. Boleh screenshot atau boleh ambil gambar. And then the next one yang saya kongsikan tadi ialah from Kementerian Pembangunan Wanita, Keluarga dan Masyarakat, talian kasih. Pun boleh ambil gambar. Yang ini ialah from JAKIM. Kalau nak dapatkan maklumat atau bantuan. Dan yang terakhir ialah dari kalau siapa-siapa yang ada kat Kuala Lumpur, boleh juga hubungi Befrienders. Befrienders ni kalau tak silap saya ada juga dekat negeri-negeri yang tertentu. But these are the contacts that you can get in touch with in case you are finding it difficult, or if you would like to express your problems with someone as soon as possible lah.
Yep.
Itu saja. Yep.
Okay. Yep. So those are the contacts. So thank you everyone for spending your time with us. So it's late. We'll see you on next time lah for the next session, hopefully. Have a good night and take care, guys. Hopefully MCO ends soon so that we can go back to our normal lives and be a bit more happier.
Inshallah.
So thank you, Khairul.
Yep. Thank you so much again for everyone. And thank you, committee, for inviting me. I do sincerely appreciate the invitation, and I feel grateful and honored to be able to share this particular metaphor of the sailboat, because the general feedback that I received when I introduced this to my patients has been quite eye-opener and insightful, because they are able to look into their well-being from another perspective, kan? So thank you so much again. I hope the session has been beneficial and insightful to all of you. Terima kasih sekali lagi, dan juga kalau ada apa-apa mungkin boleh panjang dekat Bisyri, and then Bisyri can get in touch with me if I can help in any way that I can, insyaAllah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khairul.
You're welcome. Thank you so much again, everyone.